It was barely 7 a.m. when I arrived at the Clearwater Springs Resort, the steam from my thermos swirling up into the chilled morning air. I'd worked there for a little over a year now, mostly on the cleaning crew, assigned to low-traffic areas or maintenance halls. Today, however, my supervisor had called out sick, and the shift manager handed me a list I wasn't used to seeing. My name was penciled in next to Spa West, male bathing area. I hesitated. It wasn't that I was afraid of the spa. It was just... The male bath section was reserved for VIP guests, the kind who didn't like eye contact, questions, or anyone lingering for longer than 30 seconds. Normally, someone from the senior staff handled it, someone trained to walk like a shadow and speak like a whisper. But today, it was me. I nodded quickly, not wanting to make a fuss. A job's a job, and I couldn't afford to lose it. Rent wasn't going to pay itself, and besides, who goes to the spa that early anyway? The walk from the employee wing to Spa West took me past the lush indoor garden and down a quiet, polished hallway lined with ambient lighting and fresh orchids. It always felt like a different world here, one where the rich floated and the rest of us kept the machinery running underneath. When I reached the bathhouse entrance, I found 2 doors, one labeled women and one marked men. Simple. Except the signs looked odd. The wooden women placard was dangling by a single screw, twisted halfway sideways and hanging above the left door. I paused. I looked at my sheet again. Clean Men's Spa, West Wing. I glanced back up. The door on the right had no sign. Maybe it had fallen? Either way, I figured the left was the women's and went right. I knocked twice, just in case. Silence. Hello? Housekeeping, I called gently. No response. I took a deep breath and stepped inside. The warm humidity of the room enveloped me immediately, fogging my glasses and filling my lungs with the scent of eucalyptus and expensive oils. Tiled floors gleamed beneath my sneakers, and I moved quietly, careful not to let the wheels of my cleaning cart squeak. The main spa room was empty, or so it seemed. I set down my towels and stepped toward the used laundry bin, beginning to collect a pile of damp, rolled towels into a linen bag. Then I heard it. The sound of water shifting. A faucet? No. Someone was in the hot pool. My hands froze mid-motion. A moment later, the sound of bare feet on stone echoed faintly. I stood slowly, eyes scanning through the foggy glass panels. And then I saw him. A tall figure emerged from behind the divider, broad shoulders, muscled chest, a towel wrapped low around his hips. He was drying his hair with another towel, and his face, it was too sharp, too perfect, like something out of a luxury magazine ad. His cheekbones caught the light, his eyes a piercing, curious gray. His dark hair was damp and tousled, and he moved with the slow, effortless confidence of someone who owned the world. I couldn't breathe. He hadn't seen me yet. I could still turn around. I could leave, pretend this never happened. But then his eyes locked on mine. We both froze. Time slowed. He lowered the towel from his head. A single brow lifted slightly, not in shock, not in anger, but in vague amusement. "You're early," he said, his voice low, calm. I blinked. I'm sorry. I thought this was the women's... no, the men's, oh God. I took a step back and stumbled, slipping on the edge of the wet floor. My hands flailed, the linen bag flew, and a pile of towels scattered like cottony clouds across the stone. Suddenly he was right there, one hand catching my elbow before I hit the ground. "Careful," he murmured. I looked up, my face barely inches from his. His skin smelled faintly of sandalwood and something expensive I couldn't name. "I didn't mean to intrude," I stammered, cheeks burning hotter than the steam around us. "I can tell," he replied, that half-smile still lingering on his lips. "Relax. You didn't do anything wrong." I nodded quickly and pulled away, gathering my things in a flurry of embarrassment. I'll go. I'm so sorry again. He didn't stop me, but as I reached the door, I heard him call out softly. Next time, just knock louder. I'm not always this decent. My ears flamed. I practically sprinted out of there. Back in the staff corridor, I leaned against the wall, heart pounding. What just happened? Who was that? I didn't even know his name, but the way he carried himself. Something told me he wasn't just another wealthy guest. And I was right, because 20 minutes later, the head of guest services pulled me aside with wide eyes. "Lena," she said, "you didn't hear this from me, but the man in Suite 9? That's Julian Grant. He's the Julian Grant." I blinked. "Who?" Her jaw dropped. "Julian Grant, tech magnate, youngest self-made billionaire under 35, the one who turned down Forbes and lives off-grid. He booked the entire West Wing under an alias, no press, no noise. And you just met him?" I said nothing, because how do you explain that you didn't just meet a billionaire? You slipped into his bath by mistake, and he caught you, gently, and he smiled. I didn't know it then, but that small mistake would change everything in my life, forever. I spent the rest of that morning trying to disappear. I folded sheets with trembling hands, scrubbed floors I had already scrubbed twice, and ducked behind towel carts every time I heard footsteps down the hall. My heart wouldn't stop pounding, not just from embarrassment, but from something far more confusing. That look in his eyes, calm and steady, not mocking or cold, just observant, like he saw more than I wanted to show. No one mentioned the incident. No one pulled me aside. No warning, no lecture. It was as if nothing had happened. That, in itself, made me more nervous. People didn't just forget mistakes at Clearwater Springs, especially not mistakes involving high-profile guests. But when my shift ended and I was about to clock out, my manager walked over with a clipboard in hand and a look that was unreadable. "Lena, I need you to report to Suite 9 tomorrow morning," she said. My stomach dropped. "Suite 9? She nodded. "Mr. Grant has specifically requested you to handle his room service and any spa arrangements for the remainder of his stay." I blinked. Is this a joke?" She didn't smile. "It's not. He asked for you by name." By name. How did he even know my name? I wanted to say no, to run and hide, and never make eye contact again. But jobs like mine didn't come with choices, so I nodded and forced a smile I didn't feel, said thank you, and walked out into the cold evening air with a head spinning from confusion and a heart beating far too fast. The next morning I dressed with extra care. My uniform was the same, simple and clean, but I took a little more time with my hair, tied it neatly, checked the mirror twice. When I knocked on Suite 9, my hand hesitated for a second before touching the polished wood. The door opened almost immediately. There he was again. Julian Grant. He wasn't shirtless this time. He wore a dark gray sweater and black pants. Casual, but expensive looking. His hair was still slightly damp, as if he'd just stepped out of the shower, and his eyes met mine with a quiet intensity. "Good morning," he said, stepping aside. "Good morning, sir," I replied, stepping inside cautiously, clutching my cleaning tray like a shield. He closed the door behind me. "You don't have to call me sir." I just thought it was more appropriate," I murmured. He sat down on the sofa, crossing one leg over the other. "You're nervous." I didn't deny it. He smiled, not in a smug way, but in a way that almost looked understanding. "I hope I didn't scare you yesterday." I shook my head quickly. "No, I mean, a little. But it wasn't your fault. It was mine. I should have checked the signs more carefully." "They were switched," he said, his tone matter-of-fact. I looked up. "What?" "The signs. I noticed this morning someone flipped them. Probably a prank." "Oh," I breathed, relief flooding me. "So I wasn't completely crazy." No, he said, just unlucky. I almost smiled. Or maybe lucky, he added, his eyes lingering on mine for a beat too long. I looked away, busying myself by straightening a stack of napkins that didn't need straightening. He didn't speak for a moment, then asked, "How long have you worked here?" "A little over a year." "Do you like it?" I hesitated. "It pays the bills." He chuckled. "Honest answer." "I try." He leaned back, studying me as if I were more interesting than the view of the snowy mountains outside his window. "What did you want to be before this?" I blinked. No one had ever asked me that, especially not a billionaire. "I studied graphic design for a bit," I said slowly, "but I had to drop out when my mom got sick. I've been working since." He nodded as if that explained everything, which in a way it did. "I think you'd be good at it," he said quietly. "You don't even know me." "I'm a good judge of people," he said, "and you have steady hands. That matters." I didn't know what to say to that. Over the next few days, I found myself assigned to his suite again and again. Every morning, like clockwork, I knocked on that door and entered a space that felt like another world. He was never inappropriate, never overly familiar, just curious. He asked questions, not to pry, but to listen, and I found myself answering, even when I didn't mean to. We talked about books, about music, about food. He told me stories of traveling the world, of boardrooms and missed flights, of things that felt so distant from my quiet life. But there was something about him that didn't match the headlines. He wasn't arrogant. He didn't show off. In fact, he seemed tired of the wealth, tired of being seen only for what he owned. Once, as I arranged a vase of orchids on his table, I asked, "Why me?" He looked up from his laptop. "What do you mean?" "Why did you ask for me specifically after that day?" He paused for a moment, then said, "Because you didn't try to impress me. You didn't scream or flirt or freeze. You just ran, and that felt more honest than anything I've seen in years." I didn't know how to respond, but something inside me shifted then, quietly. Still, I reminded myself every night that this was just temporary, that men like him didn't stay interested in women like me, that whatever kindness he showed was part of his charm and nothing more. I tried to believe it, but the way he looked at me, as if I was something rare in a world full of masks, made it harder and harder to hold on to that lie. And deep down, I knew something was changing, even if I didn't want it to. By the end of the first week, I knew the rhythm of his days better than I knew my own. Julian woke early, always before sunrise. He would drink black coffee with 2 cubes of sugar and no cream. He liked his breakfast light fruit, eggs, nothing greasy, and he always asked for fresh orange slices, never from a carton. He took long calls on the balcony in the late morning, then disappeared for hours, usually without a word. But every evening, like a strange new ritual, he would request something small just before the end of my shift. Sometimes it was more towels. Other times it was a lavender tea that we didn't usually serve. Once, it was just to ask if I knew where the best sunrise view was on the property. At first, I thought it was coincidence, but it wasn't. He was reaching out in his quiet way, not with grand gestures or flirtation, just presence. One evening, I brought up his laundry neatly folded, still warm from the service room. When I knocked, he answered the door in a white button-down shirt, sleeves rolled up, tie hanging loose around his neck. His hair was damp again, like always, and for a second I forgot to breathe. "Laundry delivery," I said, holding up the bundle like it was a peace offering. He smiled and stepped aside. "You really do everything, don't you?" I set the bundle on the bench by the window and turned to go, but he spoke again. "Lena, wait." I froze. He walked over slowly, not too close, but just enough to make me feel the heat of his gaze. "Do you ever stop moving?" I blinked. I don't know what you mean." "You're always working, always in a rush. Do you ever do something for yourself? I hesitated. Not really. I'm used to staying busy. He studied me for a moment, then tilted his head slightly. Have dinner with me. My heart stuttered. Excuse me? Dinner. Nothing formal, just food, conversation, no uniforms, no roles. I stared at him, unsure if I'd heard him right. You want me to have dinner with you? Yes, he said simply. Unless you have somewhere better to be. I didn't, and we both knew it. I nodded once, too fast, too nervous. Okay, but not here. His smile widened. Fair enough. The next evening, he met me at the staff gate. I wore a plain blue dress, the nicest thing I owned that didn't scream, I work in hospitality. He wore jeans and a jacket, more casual than I'd ever seen him. We didn't go far, just a small diner in town, tucked between an antique bookstore and a flower shop. No one recognized him. No one pointed or whispered. It was like the world forgot he was famous for a little while. We sat in a corner booth. He ordered pancakes. I ordered pasta. He asked me questions I hadn't thought about in years. About what I used to draw when I was younger. About my favorite movies. About what scared me. And I told him. I told him about my mother, how I'd been taking care of her since I was 22. How I dropped out of school because the bills were more urgent than my dreams. How I didn't like being touched unexpectedly. How I hated it when people assumed things about me just because I cleaned floors for a living. He listened. Really listened. When the check came, he didn't offer to pay until I insisted it be split. Then he slid his card forward anyway, not arrogantly, just calmly, and said, "Let me cover it. You gave me your time." Afterward, we walked in silence back toward the resort, the night cool and quiet around us. He didn't try to hold my hand or lean in. He just walked beside me like someone who wasn't in a hurry for the moment to end. At the gate, I turned to him. Thank you. For what? For being normal. He laughed softly. Believe me, no one's ever called me that before. I looked up at him, at the man who'd somehow made me feel safe in a room full of luxury I didn't belong in, and asked the question that had been burning in my chest. Why me? His smile faded, replaced by something more serious. Because when I'm around you, he said, I don't feel like I have to perform. You're not trying to impress me. You're not afraid to speak your mind. You don't care about my money, and that scares me in a good way. I didn't know how to respond. He took a slow breath. And maybe because you walked into my world without knowing who I was, and for the first time in years, someone looked at me like a person, not a brand. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering what I had stepped into, wondering if this was real, if it was possible that someone like him could see someone like me and not turn away. The next day, everything changed. At work, eyes followed me, colleagues whispered, my supervisor avoided mine. Then I found a note taped to my locker. You think you're special now? Just wait. We all see what you're doing. I stared at it for a long time, heart pounding. I crumpled it and threw it away, but the feeling stayed with me. That evening, Julian called the front desk and requested that I bring his room service personally. When I arrived, he was sitting at the table, reading. He looked up, saw my face, and frowned. What happened? Nothing, I said too quickly. He stood and crossed the room in 3 strides. Lena. I handed him the tray, avoiding his eyes. Just the usual, chicken salad and sparkling water. He didn't take the tray. Instead, he gently touched my elbow. Talk to me. And just like that, my mask cracked. I think people are starting to notice. Us. He exhaled slowly. Do you want me to stop? I looked up at him, heart aching, unsure of what the right answer was. No, I whispered. Then let them notice, he said. I didn't know what we were becoming, but I knew one thing. Every time I stepped into his world, I felt less like a mistake and more like someone who might actually belong, even if it terrified me. The following week felt like a dream slowly unraveling. Everything between Julian and me became softer, closer, even though we still hadn't said out loud what it was. He continued to request me by name for every service. We had dinner 3 more times, sometimes outside the resort, sometimes in his suite, where he'd have music playing softly and books stacked beside the couch, as if trying to make the space feel normal, feel like home. He never made a move I didn't welcome. He never crossed a line. And yet, the closeness was undeniable. We'd talk until midnight some days. He'd ask about my favorite places in the world, even though I'd only seen 3 states. I'd ask about the loneliest thing he'd ever done, and he'd pause for a moment, then say, living in a 10-bedroom house and hearing nothing but silence. Still, I kept reminding myself to stay grounded, because fairy tales don't happen to people like me. Then came the storm. It started small, with a side glance in the break room, a whispered comment I wasn't supposed to hear. She thinks she's better than us now. I ignored it. Then one afternoon, Carmen, one of the senior staff, who'd been working there longer than anyone, cornered me near the elevators. "Heard you've been getting special treatment," she said, folding her arms. Her voice was syrupy, but sharp. "Not every girl gets to have dinner with the billionaire guest." I felt the color drain from my face. "It's not like that." She tilted her head. "Oh, because it sure looks like that from the outside." I stepped back, unsure of what to say. Carmen was known for being possessive of the high-end guests. She played the role well, perfect hair, perfect voice, always ready with a compliment or a subtle flirtation. I was just me. That evening, Julian noticed something was off the moment I entered his suite. "What happened?" "Nothing," I lied. He stared at me for a long moment, but didn't push. The next morning it all came crashing down. I had barely arrived at work when I was summoned to the security office. My supervisor stood beside the head of housekeeping, arms crossed. A security guard held up a velvet pouch containing a gold watch, clearly expensive, clearly out of place. "We found this in your locker," he said. My legs almost gave out. "What?" "Suite 12 reported it missing," the supervisor said, her tone tight. "It was one of Mr. Grant's business guests. He says it went missing during turn-down service." I would never take anything," I stammered. "No one's accusing yet," the head of housekeeping interrupted, "but it doesn't look good." I looked at them in disbelief, then back at the pouch. My hands were shaking. "I didn't even go into Suite 12. That's Carmen's section." They didn't respond. Instead, they told me I was being suspended pending an internal review. I stood outside the employee entrance in the cold, still trying to breathe, still trying to process how fast everything had collapsed. I felt exposed, humiliated, and most of all, betrayed by the place I'd given everything to. Julian didn't know. He was in meetings, apparently. I couldn't reach him. I didn't want to cause more trouble. So I packed a small bag, called in a favor from an old friend, and took the last bus out of town. Back to where it all started. Back home. Home wasn't glamorous. It was a 2-bedroom rental in a fading Colorado town, quiet and lined with trees that had forgotten how to grow straight. My mom's old rocking chair still sat by the front porch, even though she hadn't used it in years. The inside smelled like lemon polish and memories. My friend Jenny let me stay in the guest room. She didn't ask questions, just handed me a blanket, made tea, and said, "Rest. Tomorrow can wait." But I couldn't rest, not with my heart stuck in that bathhouse moment, when a billionaire had looked at me like I was someone worth noticing, not with my future dangling by a thread over something I didn't do, not with the fear that I'd ruined the one good, strange thing that had entered my life. 2 days passed. No calls, no messages. On the 3rd day, I walked to the small bakery downtown and offered to help for a few hours. The owner, who knew my mother from years back, smiled and put me behind the counter. It was comforting, predictable, safe, until the bell above the front door rang, and Julian Grant walked in, wearing a navy coat, hair tousled, eyes sharper than I remembered. I froze. He looked around once, spotted me, and didn't hesitate. "Lena." I didn't speak. My hands were flour-covered, my apron stained with jam. He walked slowly toward the counter, never taking his eyes off me. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have found you sooner." I swallowed. "How did you find me at all?" "Checked your employee records," he said quietly. "Then your emergency contact. Then I drove here." "You drove?" I said, blinking. "By yourself?" "I needed to see you," he said. "I needed to look you in the eyes when I told you the truth." My breath caught. "What truth?" "The watch was planted," he said. "Carmen confessed yesterday. We found the security footage. She switched the laundry tags. She wanted you out." I stared at him, emotions crashing like waves I couldn't hold back. "I'm not going back," I said after a long pause. "Not there." "I know," he said softly. "I wouldn't ask you to." I looked down at my hands, flour still clinging to my skin, and said, "So, why are you here?" He was quiet for a moment. Then he stepped closer and said, "Because I missed you. Because something about the way you looked at me, like I was just a man, not a headline, made me feel human again." I couldn't look at him. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small item, a folded note. He slid it across the counter. I hesitated, then opened it. Inside, in his handwriting, were 4 simple words. "Come see the sunrise." I looked up. He smiled. "You told me once you'd never seen one from the mountains," he said. "I thought maybe we could fix that." My heart, tired and aching, began to beat again. Not loudly, not wildly, but steadily. And in that moment, I knew. This wasn't the end. It was the storm. But storms sometimes clear the sky. I didn't say yes right away. I didn't throw off my apron and run into his arms like a movie scene. I just stood there behind the counter of that tiny bakery, the scent of cinnamon and bread rising between us, and let the weight of everything hang in the silence. My whole life had been about keeping my balance, never leaning too far into hope, never trusting too quickly, especially not someone like him. But he didn't rush me. He just waited, hands in his pockets, eyes steady, like he knew I needed space to believe him. That night, I found myself lying awake in the small guest bed, his note folded beside me on the pillow. "Come see the sunrise." 4 words that somehow said more than all the lavish gestures and promises I'd ever heard in my life. The next morning, before the sun had even touched the rooftops, I stepped outside into the cold mountain air, my jacket zipped to the top, and fingers curled tight in my sleeves. A sleek black car was parked at the curb. Julian stood beside it, leaning back against the passenger door with a thermos in hand. He looked up when he saw me and smiled like he wasn't sure I'd come. "I brought coffee," he said, holding it out like an offering. I took it without a word, the warmth seeping into my fingers. We didn't talk much on the drive, just listened to the quiet hum of the engine and the crackling of frost under the tires. He drove with one hand, calm and steady, the way he always was, like he had nowhere to be except exactly here. He took me to a place I'd never seen, even though I'd lived near the mountains all my life. A narrow road that wound high up into the cliffs, past empty hiking paths and frozen streams, until we reached a small overlook that felt like the edge of the world. He stepped out first, walked around to open my door like it was the most natural thing, then led me to the edge where a wooden bench sat waiting. The valley stretched below us in shadows and silence. Above, the sky was starting to shift black, fading into blue, stars blinking out one by one. "Give it a minute," he said softly. I sat beside him, pulled my knees close, and sipped the coffee slowly. And then the first light came. It started like a whisper, brushing the tops of the trees, then spilled slowly across the peaks like paint, gold and pink, and the softest orange I'd ever seen. The clouds glowed, the snow sparkled, and the whole world felt quiet and alive at the same time. Julian didn't say a word. He just watched my face as I watched the sun. "It's beautiful," I whispered. He nodded. "You are too." I turned to him, startled. He wasn't smiling this time. His expression was open, vulnerable, something I hadn't seen before in those steel-colored eyes. "I don't know what this is yet," he said. "I don't know what you want from me, or what I can even offer you that doesn't feel like a mess. But I know this: when I wake up, I want to see your face more than any skyline or profit chart. I want the mess, if it means it's real." I looked at him, unsure whether to laugh or cry. "You barely know me. I know the way you fold your sleeves when you're nervous. I know you eat the edges of toast first. I know you get quiet when people hurt you, not because you're weak, but because you've learned not to expect kindness." My breath caught. "And I know," he added, softer now, "that I haven't stopped thinking about you since the moment you slipped on the bathhouse floor and apologized for breathing." I closed my eyes. This wasn't a fantasy. It wasn't a rescue. It wasn't some rich man swooping in to fix my life. This was something else. This was someone seeing me, really seeing me for the first time in a long time. "I don't want to be your project," I said quietly. "You're not," he replied. "You're the one thing I didn't expect, and I've built my whole life expecting everything." I looked out over the mountains, then back at him. "Then let's figure this out," I said. Together, slowly, without press releases or headlines. His smile returned, small and real. "That's all I want." We sat there until the sun rose high and the snow began to melt around our feet. And in that moment, wrapped in silence and cold and something warm I couldn't name yet, I felt something shift. Not like the world changing all at once, but like a new page finally turning after years stuck on the same sentence. He didn't promise me forever. I didn't need him to. But he offered something better. A beginning. Returning to the city with Julian felt surreal. We didn't go back to the resort. He had already checked out, discreetly, and made arrangements to stay in one of his private residences on the edge of the lake. It wasn't a mansion or a high-rise. It was a quiet, modern home made of glass and stone, perched right where the sky met the water. He offered me the guest room, but I never used it. At first, we kept everything private. We cooked together, we talked until midnight. We played old jazz records and danced barefoot in the kitchen. There were mornings we stayed in pajamas and watched the mist curl over the lake, and nights when neither of us said much, but the silence was comfortable, like a shared language neither of us had spoken before. Julian didn't pressure me. He didn't parade me in front of cameras or introduce me at galas. He seemed almost relieved to live outside of that world, even if only for a while. But the world, as it always does, found us. It started with a blurry photo. Someone had spotted us walking out of a bookstore downtown, laughing. I had my hair up in a messy bun, wearing one of Julian's sweaters. He was carrying a bag of cookies from the bakery next door. We looked happy, too happy. The image spread quickly. The headlines were immediate. "Who is the mystery woman with billionaire Julian Grant? From maid to muse? Insider says Julian's got a new flame." I thought it would pass. It didn't. Within days, I was getting messages from people I didn't know, reporters calling my old job, online threads filled with strangers judging me based on one photo and a job title. Some were cruel, calling me a gold digger. Others were condescending, assuming I'd somehow won the lottery. None of them saw me. Not really. I tried to ignore it. But one afternoon, while walking home from the market, I overheard a group of women whispering behind me. Can you believe she used to clean hotel rooms? Now she's playing house with Julian Grant. She won't last a month. He always moves on. That night, I sat on the back steps of the house, watching the wind ripple across the lake, and tried not to cry. Julian found me there. He sat beside me, silent at first. Then he said, "We can stop. All of it. Go somewhere else. Stay off the radar. Whatever you need." I shook my head. "I don't want to run." He looked at me. "Then let me stand with you." The next day, he scheduled a press interview, not to clear his name, not to protect his brand, but to speak about me. He sat in front of cameras in a black sweater and jeans, looking calm and steady, and said, "I met someone who reminded me what it means to be human. She didn't know my net worth. She didn't care. She walked into my life literally and gave me honesty when I didn't know I needed it." I watched it from the kitchen, tears blurring the screen. Later that evening, he found me in the hallway and said, "It's your choice now. We can stay quiet, or we can be honest, out loud." So I chose. I didn't do interviews. I didn't post pictures. But I stopped hiding. When we walked into a restaurant, I held his hand. When someone stared, I smiled back. And slowly, the noise faded. The headlines lost interest. New scandals replaced old stories. And what remained was the quiet rhythm of a life we were building together. Julian encouraged me to return to design, not in a grand way, not by buying me a studio or forcing me into business. He found my old sketchbook, the one I kept buried, at the bottom of my suitcase, and bought me a set of pencils and a blank journal. "Just start again," he said. So I did. I enrolled in online classes. I started sketching every morning by the window, while Julian worked on his laptop across the room. We shared the silence, each lost in our own focus, but always aware of the other. Sometimes I'd look up and catch him watching me. "I love seeing you like this," he said once. "Doing what you love." I smiled. "That's funny. I was just thinking the same about you." We weren't perfect. We had arguments, moments of miscommunication, days when the world felt heavy again, but we learned to talk, to apologize, to hold space for each other. One night, after we had both fallen asleep on the couch, tangled under a blanket, Julian whispered, "I never thought I'd have something simple that made me feel this full." I half woke and mumbled, "You have a yacht and a private jet." He laughed softly. "None of that ever made me feel like this." The next morning, we went to the farmer's market together. We bought sunflowers and eggs and bread from a woman named Carol, who gave us extra jam for free. On the walk home, Julian stopped in the middle of the street, turned to me, and said, "You do realize this is my favorite part of life now, right?" "What is?" I asked. "This. You. Eggs and jam. Laughing over bad jokes, standing next to you and forgetting that the world expects anything else from me." I didn't reply. I just reached for his hand and squeezed it. I didn't need a headline. I didn't need the world to understand. I just needed this. Us. Simple, real, ours. Exactly 1 year after the day I walked into that bathhouse by mistake, Julian handed me a sealed envelope over breakfast. I was sitting at the counter in one of his oversized sweaters, sipping coffee barefoot, hair still a mess from sleep. He slid it toward me like it was just a bill or a note, no big gestures, no dramatic pause. I opened it slowly, unsure of what to expect. Inside was a single invitation card, simple, white, and embossed with elegant gold lettering. Clearwater Springs Spa and Retreat, private opening ceremony. Julian Grant requests the honor of your company. My eyes lifted to meet his. "You rebuilt it?" I asked softly. He nodded. "Renovated the whole wing. It's now a wellness space with art therapy rooms, hot spring pools, and a gallery." I blinked. "A gallery?" He smiled. "For emerging artists, designers, people who deserve a place to be seen, like you." Emotion welled up in my chest. I set the envelope down, not trusting my voice. "There's more," he said gently. "I was hoping you'd come to the ceremony. There's something I want to show you." I nodded. "I will." The day of the reopening arrived with soft snow on the mountain roads. We drove up early, the same winding path I used to take every morning as a housekeeping employee, except now I wasn't clocking in. I was walking in through the front entrance with the man whose name had become synonymous with the resort's rebirth. Everything had changed, and yet, in many ways, it felt like I had come home. The new spa wing was breathtaking. Minimalist lines, golden stone walls, long glass windows that opened toward a lake view. Guests and staff bustled in quiet preparation. But Julian kept guiding me past all of it toward a hallway I didn't recognize. He stopped in front of a pair of frosted glass doors. "This room's not on the map yet," he said. "I saved it." When he opened the door, I stepped into a warm, misty space, filled with gentle light and the sound of running water. The scent of lavender and sandalwood curled in the air. It looked like a dream version of the old spa, tranquil, intimate, glowing. Then I saw it. Near the edge of the steam pool was a small bench, and beside it, mounted delicately on the wall, was a photo, a candid shot. Me, that morning a year ago, gathering towels in a daze, framed in soft lighting and warmth. I had no idea anyone had taken it. Beneath it, a plaque read, "The moment that changed everything," in honor of the mistake that became the beginning. I turned toward Julian, stunned. "You kept this?" He shrugged, but his eyes were filled with meaning. "I wanted to remember the exact moment I saw you," he said quietly, "not just with my eyes, but with something I didn't know had been asleep in me for years." I laughed softly, tears slipping down without warning. "You're impossible." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. No crowd, no cameras, just the soft scent of lavender and the sound of my breath catching. "I used to think I had everything," he said, "but I was always missing the one thing I couldn't buy, a reason, a heartbeat, a real home." He opened the box. A delicate silver ring sat inside, simple, timeless, just like him. "I don't need an answer today," he said. "I just want you to know that I want forever. Whether we call it that now or wait a little longer, whether we wear rings or not, I want to wake up with you beside me for the rest of my life." I stepped forward and closed the box softly with my fingers. Then I looked into his eyes. "You already have forever," I said. "You had it the moment you didn't laugh when I fell in a puddle of towels." He smiled. "Is that a yes?" I nodded. "Of course it is." We sat there for a long time afterward, not speaking, just soaking in the warmth of the moment, the light, the sound of steam and water gently folding over itself. Sometimes life gives you exactly what you never asked for. A wrong turn, a misplaced door, a billionaire in a towel with a heart more grounded than anyone I'd ever met. And sometimes that's how the best stories begin, with a mistake, a laugh, and a love that refuses to fade.